Hello and welcome to Unplugged, an IoT podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of IoT and automation. I'm your host, Phil Seboa.
G'day, Phil, and hi, everyone. My name is Ed Fuentes. Well, Phil, I'm excited today, but for two reasons. I get feedback. People say I'm always excited, but today for two specific reasons. One is that this episode of Unplugged is made possible by Phoenix Contact and the PLCnext technology, which actually, for those who can't see it, it's behind my back. And for those who can't, I've got one in the office, which is great. And Phil, the other reason I'm very excited today is because, we are big digital transformation fans, a lot of interest around IoT, and both of us have been involved around M.E.S, all that takes and what it means and the challenges that businesses have. We sort of learn what we can through following podcasts, listening, or reading information. But today it's been great to have someone join us who is a specialist in that field or has lots of experience, and we're looking forward to this episode and talking to our special guest today, Matt Barber. Thank you, Matt, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Matt is globally recognized as an M.E.S specialist. So we'll dive into what M.E.S actually stands for, and is a passionate educator of the manufacturing operations management and future of smart manufacturing. Based in the UK, Matt has worked with hundreds of manufacturers, helping them unlock operational excellence, embrace digital transformation, and he currently runs the M.E.S business at Infor, where his expertise has helped position Infor as M.E.S industrial leader. We're excited to have him on and demystify M.E.S for our listeners today. So as Ed mentioned, welcome, Matt.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. So really happy to talk to you guys today.
Awesome. So let's, start at the very foundations. For those who have not heard or maybe have heard the term and aren't quite sure what M.E.S means, why does it matter really for manufacturers today?
Yeah, so M.E.S stands for Manufacturing Execution System. Sounds a little bit aggressive, but it's just an application, and it predominantly focuses on executing production orders, collecting downtime, receiving counts and scrap, and ultimately getting to the point where you can calculate an OEE figure. However, I would say that manufacturing execution systems have grown over time. Naturally, there are other bits around production that people want to capture and record and are interested in. So it's grown into other areas. So, for example, a lot of M.E.S systems now will have elements of quality or elements of maintenance management. So there's a new term on the market. The new term on the market is MOM. Mm-hmm. MOM isn't really an application, it's more of a concept, but it's trying to be the architecture that brings together all of the different things in the operational space in a factory. So production, quality, inventory, and maintenance. And I think what you're seeing in the market is M.E.S applications are slowly evolving to take on more and more MOM type functionality. So the products I work with Infor M.E.S, that's one of the strengths for us. We cover production, quality, inventory, logistics, maintenance, tooling, energy. I could go on. And the beauty of that is you've got one kind of contextualized system where if you think about being in a factory, if you're an operator, you're not just starting and stopping production runs and explaining why there's some downtime and saying how many pieces you've made. You're potentially taking samples off the line, maybe doing a quality check yourself, maybe sending it to a lab. You're consuming materials into the process, scanning barcodes, making sure it's the correct one to consume. You're printing labels, putting them on the packs. You're doing some autonomous maintenance. You want visibility of what the maintenance team are going to do in terms of asset care. So it's all connected. And that's really where that kind of MOM terminology comes in. It's the operational frontline workers in the factory and the work that they need to do and the data they need to see and the information they need access to do their jobs.
But in that space there, Matt, around that M.E.S evolving into MOM, and MOM, just so everyone understands, what does MOM stand for?
Manufacturing Operations Management.
Okay, fantastic. M.E.S and evolving into that MOM space, you would have seen through your journey, for many years, there was a meme around what M.E.S stood for. I'm sure you've heard of it, for many Excel spreadsheets, and that's how a lot of businesses potentially wish to run their business. But you would have seen implementations, I imagine, in your journey that have truly created that transformation that the manufacturer was looking for through the operations. Can you maybe give us an understanding of what you've seen happen, what they had before, and when they implemented M.E.S or the MOM, which you mentioned, not a product, more a strategy, what that turned out to become?
Yeah, the Excel analogy made me laugh because if you've ever been in a factory, and I'm sure you guys have been in plenty of factories, you see paper and Excel and everything everywhere. ERP on the shop floor. You see departmental applications that are very siloed, and that's the way that most manufacturers work. And changing that to a system that effectively takes away paper, takes away Excel, gives you a joined up view of what's happening in real time across your operations. It's a huge change for people, and not an easy change. I don't think we should. It's not. You don't just install the software and have a load of success. There's a lot of effort that goes into making that successful across the organisation. A lot of change management that's needed. A vision, strong leadership, buy-in from the people at all levels of the business. But the companies that do it well obviously reap the rewards, and there are a number of kind of common returns on investment that you would get from implementing an M.E.S. Some of them are a little bit less tangible, like you get real-time visibility of what's happening in your factory right now. Okay, there's not necessarily an ROI metric you can put on that, but think of the improved reactivity you can have. So, I know maybe you catch a quality defect earlier than anticipated. It might have taken you an hour to pick it up before. You might have made 50,000 pieces in that time. That's a lot of scrap. Or maybe it's something around downtime. So, coupled with automatic downtime collection, you start to see not just the long stops that the operators recorded manually, but you also see all the tiny stops, the micro stops, which often can have a bigger impact on production than the longer stops can, because most of the time the longer stops are planned. So there's a lot of kind of general benefits that you can get across the board from implementing an M.E.S. One of my favourite stories is actually it's a food and bev company. They make Yorkshire tea. I don't know if I don't get Yorkshire tea in Australia, but it's a very famous brand over here. And they basically make tea bags and coffee beans and coffee bags and those sort of things. And when you're in a food and bev industry, it's really important that you at least put as much in the pack as you said you were going to put in the pack. It's 227 grams. You need at least 227 grams. And that means that in a lot of cases, people overfill because they don't want to underfill. If you put in 229 grams, that's 2 grams extra. And those 2 grams are called giveaway because you're effectively giving it away for free. With an M.E.S, because you've got real-time data collection and you can see exactly what's happening, rather than reviewing those bag weights on a daily basis or a shiftly basis, you can review them immediately. And that means that you can be a lot tighter on your tolerances. And over the course of a day, even if you just save 1 gram on every bag you make, that's a huge cost saving. So it's things like that where you get this kind of this additional level of information about what's happening in the factory right now. You can be more reactive, you can have tighter controls, and ultimately that's going to lead to cost savings and efficiency improvements.
In that story there, Matt, did they know they were giving away, or was that something they realised when they were implementing M.E.S?
No, they knew. So basically they would do like an average bag weight check, and they would do that regularly, but they'd only be able to kind of assess that on a 12-hour period. So it depends what product they make, but let's say a 12-hour period. And when they had the M.E.S, they could obviously look at that at a much finer level of granularity. I think they look at it every few minutes now. So obviously within a few minutes, if it starts to trend upwards, you can quickly react to that and bring it back down and bring it into control.
So that's that SBC type functionality, right? Like just trying to see where your upper and lower limits are, and maybe creating an alarm-based event so that you can communicate to the operator that something's going out of spec. I think there's probably some side benefits in terms of the local market there and everyone getting a bit more stronger tea. In the UK, I think that's probably a positive
We do like
as well. Especially Yorkshire tea. I think they're all a bit stronger around that
Yeah.
region
Yeah,
as
no,
well.
it definitely is. Yeah, and SBC is a really common part of MES. So SBC is statistical process control. It's not actually just about whether something's gone out of spec. Often SBC is more around having control limits within the tolerance limits, so that you can see when things are about to go out of spec before you can correct them before it becomes a problem. And that might be that they've got some slightly tighter control limits than you have your spec limits, or it might be that you've got trend analysis that can happen. So, for example, you're not out of spec, but the last 7 measurements have all been increasing. So you are trending towards going out of spec. So there's loads of different kind of trend rules that you can have with SPC, and it can pick up on those patterns before they become a problem. And with Taylor's, that was a good example of where they were trying to reduce the amount of giveaway. But in other customers, there's another customer we work with, they make the kind of aluminium cans that go inside inhalers, and they would make, I don't know, 50,000 of those in an hour. And if they do a test once every hour and they have to scrap an hour's worth of product, that's a lot of wasted material, and again, a huge impact. So yeah, SPC comes into play in many different use cases, and can be a real time saver and money saver. It's kind of, for me, it's like everyone talks about predictive modeling and AI, and I know it's a huge topic. Well, SPC has been doing that for years. It's the same kind of thing. So yeah, just another example.
Yeah, just getting ahead of the problem before it becomes a huge cost is probably, something that manufacturers across the board are trying to achieve, whether that's, predictive maintenance type indicators or product specification creep, those types of indications. Is there any other sort of highlights that you can kind of say around MES type applications, where something was indicating that was going awry?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stories like that. I think, to be honest, that one of the things I really like is bringing together the full picture of the factory for people to review it in a much more structured environment. So let me give you another example. A company that we work with, you'll have all been at the morning meeting in a factory. Yeah, every factory. I've never been to a factory that doesn't have a morning meeting. It's they do it everywhere, and they review, what happened yesterday. How does that trend against the last 7 days, the last month? What are we going to be doing in the factory today? What major issues have we had? Have we got audits or customers on site? Have we had health and safety concerns? All of those things play into the morning meeting. And one of our customers, is actually many of our customers have done this, but this was the one where it struck me the most. Previously, when I've been there, they had printouts everywhere, printouts of charts, printouts of Excel, printouts of whatever it was, and they were everywhere. It was organized chaos. They all knew what it was, but there was a lot going on. Anyway, after implementing the system, they kind of configured a load of their own screens and dashboards. They started using our morning meeting dashboard that we provide, and they just had 2 big TV screens. And the morning meeting had completely transformed. They'd go through in an organized fashion, what's happened with health and safety, what's happened with quality, what's happened with downtime. If there were any issues, they log it and they assign actions to people, and they review the actions that are still open from previous days. And that was one of the moments for me when I realized that the impact that our software has on people, and not just our software, there'll be other MES applications that do the same sort of thing. But when you take away the paper and you put in place the digital replica of that, you don't just get that data immediately without having to go and print things off and work out. You also get the ability to drill in. Okay, oh, that's interesting. Well, why did that happen? And you can go and look at the next level of data and the next level of data. So you've got this kind of wealth of information for continuous improvement activities that you would never have had before. And I think that's one of the real powers of putting in a system like this. And yeah, that's one of the moments I've had where it kind of struck me, wow, this has completely changed the way that they work, and had a hugely positive impact.
Yeah, creating structure to the chaos. Just even having a repeatable process the guys on the plant floor can actually follow, and as you mentioned, compare from the previous day's event or week's event. Try and do that continuous improvement on a daily basis. It's hugely beneficial.
With these digitization and creating that environment for these customers that you've built there, Matt, through your product, or like you mentioned, any other M.E.S products or other ones. You mentioned about real-time data. Is that, I imagine, has to be the first part of the journey of implementing, let's say, a high-level M.E.S. What have you seen when you go to sites? Do they have infrastructure in place? Or is that the first challenge you have to face? Give me an understanding of how that happens.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it varies. Some companies have got a lot of automation already. They already collect information. They might already have a SCADA system, or other companies just have manual data collection. They at the end of the shift, they just write down what they did, and that gets logged somewhere. So you do get all sorts in between. What I always say to people is, if you want a smart factory, if you want to digitally transform operations, okay, you need an M.E.S, but you don't just need an M.E.S. It's an ecosystem. It's a bigger project than just that. So you need to think about all of the applications that contribute to that end goal. You need to think about all of the hardware that contributes to that end goal, and they all need to start working together. One of the analogies I sometimes give, I wrote a post on it on LinkedIn a while back, is I can buy a new set of scales, but it's not going to help me lose weight. I have to it's going to tell me that how heavy I am, but I have to exercise more. I have to go out for walks. I have to eat more healthily. I have to change the way I do my processes and what I do. The scales are just a tool to help me measure how well I'm doing and capture some of that data. I'm assuming we're getting digital scales here. Capture some of that data and give me some insights. So you can't just buy the software. It's much broader than that. And I think the automation piece is a really key part of that journey. And what you sometimes find is some manufacturers will just start automating their most critical lines, and then over time they might roll that out as they start to see some of those benefits.
No, that's one of the key things that Phil and I have been involved in that space for quite a long time, about helping industry automate and improve the data at that ecosystem, so that things like M.E.S, I won't say are easy. I won't say that's are possible to get that information that you need. And you mentioned before, Matt, that M.E.S is getting better and better. It was OEE in the beginning, and now we're seeing the proliferation of more advancements in the technology. And you mentioned AI and predictive analytics. So as that happens, as the M.E.S has that intelligence, we connect to AI, predictive analytics, what do you think the role of human decision making, how does that evolve on the shop floor?
Yeah. I think the data that is captured by M.E.S, the real-time granular level of data you capture from the shop floor and from the warehouses and the factory, that is rife for AI and ML models. So that the data is the first part of the journey. The next part of the journey is evaluating that data. And some of that is going to be in real time. Some of that might be retrospectively, depending on what type of activity you're doing. Is it something you need immediate feedback about, or is it kind of a continuous improvement activity? And then there needs to be a feedback loop. So that feedback loop can either be show the operator some information that will help them based on the data that's been collected and the algorithms that have been executed, or increasingly nowadays with things like agents, do something automatically. You're always going to have the decision of, do I want something to happen automatically, or do I want just the data to be presented and for someone else to make a decision? And depending on what the information is and what the action is, you may or may not want it to be automatic. I think over time people will start to trust these models more, and so more things will become automated. But I think there's still a lot of let's say people are still hesitant to automate some of those things, particularly in the production shop floor. If there was a bit of data missing, or we didn't capture all the parameters, or there was a hallucination of the data that it produced and the recommendation it came up with, then suddenly that's actually got a big knock-on impact. for the shop floor. So I'm not saying never do it. Of course, there are going to be examples where that's a great thing to do, but there is caution within manufacturing in general about how far you should go down that path. In general, I would say that people are still dipping their toe in the water with AI. So it's everywhere. You can just go to Gemini or ChatGPT and you've got AI at your fingertips. Things like generative AI are a lot easier to implement. So we've got generative, I say easier, my development team will probably kill me for that. But we've got we've got the ability to go to reports in the system and ask a question. It looks at the data and it gives you an answer, and it's really good. It gives you some really interesting information, and you can do that on any data. But if you want a detailed machine learning algorithm, you actually have to come up with a hypothesis. You have to make sure that you've got all the right inputs. You have to make sure that you've tested it, that you can train it on what is good and what is bad and what the responses are. And then you need to start to learn to trust it and implement it over time. That's much harder, but much more powerful. So if you can get those models trained up and if you can get them working, then they can have a much bigger impact on the business. But you don't just switch one of those on. There's a lot of effort that goes into that. Let's say, for example, you've got all the data you think is important, but you missed that actually the ambient temperature of the factory plays a factor in that particular bit, but you didn't capture that. So it's skewing all your, and it's little things like that where sometimes you don't even know what it is that's affecting those results. So you've got to be really sure that you've got all that information input in the right way to get the right response from the algorithm.
Yeah, I think manufacturers are, risk adverse, because production is king, right? So you want to make sure that everything that you're doing is to avoid downtime events. And so if you're introducing any sort of, AI that is inherently risky, without proper due diligence, you're going to run into some real challenges and headaches. So yeah, what industrial manufacturers want is consistency, dependency, resiliency. So, AI, I'm not sure we're quite there yet, but it definitely will impact and influence decision making as well by collating that data, understanding it at scale. I think M.E.S plays a huge part in that because it gives context to the data, traceability, quality analysis, all these kind of contributors to the hypothesis of really good production lines as well. So yeah, just really interested in seeing how this goes. I guess, are you seeing your customer base leaning towards or where are they on this journey right at the moment? Are you seeing people well advanced, or actually they're just getting to grips with M.E.S at this point and just trying to implement these types of solutions or strategies?
Yeah, different people in different places, of course. I don't know if you know the history of the company that I work for, but we were a pure play M.E.S vendor for a long time, and we were acquired by Infor in 2021. Infor is obviously a huge company. It offers many different enterprise applications, but it also offers a technology platform called Infor, which is where all of the AI, machine learning, and other advanced technologies like robotic process automation and process mining, those kind of advanced technologies all sit on that platform. So we are getting a lot of interest from customers because obviously the M.E.S has a lot of data, the Infor has the technology. So we're working on projects to kind of bring those two things together and try and deliver some real value for our customers, which is great because we would never have been able to do that without Infor. As an M.E.S company on our own, it just wouldn't have been on the cards. And of course, that's absolutely crucial in today's environment. But the goal is kind of twofold. It's do something that really adds some value for a customer. And then if we can, it's make that repeatable, because then we can add value for more customers. And yeah, the more repeatable things we can find, obviously, the better. And I've heard lots of interesting stories. Obviously, there's been some things we've worked on, but I also hear other case studies and stories from other vendors. And I think there's a lot of exciting things happening in that space right now. And you are going to see that blow up over the next few years as that becomes more prevalent in the industry. There's a lot of people still don't even have M.E.S. So, to take that to the next level and do AI on top of it. But yeah, it's a really exciting space. There's a lot of exciting opportunity there. And I see that being something that happens going forward.
Who's most interested in deploying MES systems from an organizational level? Is it plant floor operators looking to structure their operations, or is it the management and leadership position driving efficiency gains, or is it a mix of both?
Yeah, it really comes from three places. It could be leadership. So C-suite want they want a continuous improvement activities. They want more modern technology, and there could be a whole range of different reasons for that. Maybe it's ROI. Maybe they're looking to sell and they want better systems in place to increase the valuation of their company. It could be loads of different things. But I would say predominantly it's driven by either operations or IT. Historically, if I look back 5 to 10 years ago, M.E.S was typically driven by operations and typically driven at a plant level. So we just want you to come in and do something in production and quality at this one site, and we've got plant level budget to make that happen. That's not how people are looking at it anymore. Now it's like we've got 25 sites. This is how our operations look. We want to digitally transform. We want to have standardized global master data for all our materials and quality checks and other information. We want to have centralized reporting so we can look at the OE and the information across all the different KPIs across all of our landscape. We want to change our processes to make sure that they're more streamlined and more standardized. And that is then being driven more from an IT side because it's more of an enterprise level change. That's definitely a big adjustment I've seen over the last kind of 5 to 10 years.
Everyone's trying to, I guess, amass all those different those sites right under one umbrella.
And within that journey, come on, man.
No, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, in that journey, that movement, that IT and operation, while IT now wanting to do so much, being like a traditional manufacturing setup, and then going fully digital or moving towards being fully digital. What are some of the underestimated challenges that they face in doing that?
I think that the number one challenge on any project is the change management aspect for the business. So whether that is the best companies have buy-in from leadership, they get buy-in from various levels of the organization, they have a clear vision, they're willing to change the way that they work because they recognize that the way they work has built up over time and is perhaps not the best, not kind of like industry standard or the best way that they could do things. And that doesn't mean they change everything, but certainly being flexible where it makes sense to be flexible. Those are the best companies. I see on both sides of the scale, of course, but companies where you've got some factions in the organization who don't want the product or don't want to change the way they work, or maybe they're wedded to a product that they either built or that they've had close connections with in the past. That can be quite disruptive. And then you need strong leadership to step in and incentivize them to do the right thing for the sake of the project and for the sake of the business, and explain why it is that we're going down this path. It's the people and the change management. That's the thing that makes the biggest difference in the projects, and that's the thing that can have the biggest challenge. If everyone's rowing in the same direction, if everyone's under the same vision, you can make it happen. But if there's friction, then that makes it more challenging.
There's definitely strategic alignment that's required for any transformation. I guess we have it, when we're talking about digital transformation, that comes up as a common theme, right? People, process, and technology. You really need that people part to be at the forefront to do any sort of technical type project. You just need everyone in alignment. As well.
Phil, because you and I have seen presentations on M.E.S and work for companies, and the graphics look great. The demo looks amazing, and people say, "Yes, I want one of those." and it looks great. But the challenges around what you mentioned, Matt, people management, as you said, processing technology, they're all tough things. And I always associate, Matt, MES, maybe this is wrong with me, I always associate MES with people with large budgets, big businesses or medium-sized businesses. A lot of our customers that we deal with, well, in Australia anyway, they're not massive businesses with those big budgets. So how do you think the smaller manufacturers can leverage MES and digitally transform without the big budgets that the larger companies have?
That is a great question. I see, historically, there were the big players in the market, in the MES market, who were effectively big monolith applications. You see people use the word monolith all the time on LinkedIn, and we all know who they're referring to. More recently, there have been other applications on the market that have grown up that are much more agile, much more innovative, much more flexible, able to be configured. You don't need to write code to make these things happen and stitch it together. You can use drag and drop interfaces. You can build things. And they are actually, I would say they're diverting in two paths. One path is the path we're taking. We're Infor are a large enterprise software company, and we're targeting large enterprise manufacturers. So what we want is a very highly configurable, strong user interface, out of the box solution where you can make some tweaks and changes, and it's very flexible, but you're not writing code. That's one area of the market, and that's great. There's another area of the market that I also think is great, and there's a lot of exciting applications coming up in that space, which is more around, I'm a smaller manufacturer. I share the same challenges as larger manufacturers, and I perhaps got some technical people that come from a PLC or a SCADA background, and I want to start visualizing some of that data, collecting some more information, getting some more KPIs. That's where companies like Ignition, for example, I know you guys work with Ignition. That's where those sort of products come in. You can with some in-house knowledge and expertise, you can get a lot of value out of an application like that. It's two completely opposite ends of the market. You're after two different things, but they both have a place. And I think maybe over time, some of those manufacturers will grow to the point where perhaps they outgrow that type of software and they want something to be managed by another company, but maybe they won't. And you just have to pick the right application for your needs. And there's a load of different MES applications on the market. I believe we have the best one, of course. I'm sure other people believe they have the best one. but there are lots of different things on the market. And what I would say is, not all MES are created equal. A lot of MES applications are for a very specific industry. There are some really, really strong applications, but they only do very narrow industries. So if you're in a different industry, even though they're a good MES, they're not a good fit for you. So you can usually narrow down what you need to 3 to 5 MES companies just by asking some basic questions about the industry and about the budget and about the requirements in terms of the enterprise level, and then just take it from there. But it's not an easy process to choose an MES. It covers a lot of different functionality, and there's a lot of integrations with plant equipment and other applications. So there's a lot of considerations you need to make when you're making one of those decisions.
Yeah, there's a lot of ingrained requirements around infrastructure, around what's your financial model. Do you want to own the product, or do you want to have a SaaS type solution where you can, just utilize a particular platform? Maybe you don't even want to host it in your own ecosystem. You want to have it in the cloud infrastructure and utilize that type of environment. So yeah, I totally agree where you have to kind of do your due diligence, understand what your requirements are very strategically, and then align with the right package or solution out there in the market. And definitely for anyone trying to, navigate those worlds, there's plenty of opportunities to reach out to, technical people out there to try and decipher what's going to work for your business out there.
Yeah, and there are analysts who do that for you anyway. So you can look at Gartner, you can look at IDC, you can look at Nucleus. There are people whose job it is to go and evaluate those solutions. So yeah, you use them as well.
Absolutely. And so I guess, you've worked across many different countries, cultures. I guess what are the other, opportunities that you've seen, out in the market to improve operations, as you said, right? It's more of a strategy. Where are you seeing opportunities for growth for other type of industries, or where are you seeing, MES being deployed next?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's our focuses are usually on countries like the US and Europe, places where they've already got a lot of automation. They've got perhaps a bit more money to spend in terms of budgets and in terms of digital transformation projects. They're not doing so many things manually anymore. There's a real desire to get rid of paper. So those are the kind of the markets where people are investing more heavily in kind of smart factory initiatives and digital transformation. But MES can also support in more manual processes as well. I mean, just because you haven't got your data captured automatically via a PLC doesn't mean that it's not an improvement to remove paper and have all your work instructions provided on a screen or a tablet. Doesn't mean that it's not better to record the quantities that you've made, or the downtime that's happened that shift, or the scrap that's been created on a mobile device or on a screen that gets recorded, and you can still look at reports and it's just not collecting that data automatically. So yeah, I wouldn't say regionally there's really a set of regions where it makes sense or doesn't make sense. But I mean, in general, the MES market it's a massively growing market, and the reason for that is almost no one has one. If you look at manufacturers in general, we spoke about it at the beginning. You don't go into a company very often and not see paper on the shop floor or not see an Excel spreadsheet. So I kind of feel like MES is going through the kind of growth spurt that ERP had 20 years ago. And that's a really good thing, because you think how many people out there in the market know about ERP, loads of them, but almost no one knows about MES, relatively speaking. So as we continue up this curve, as it becomes more and more popular, as people start to realize the benefits they can get from removing paper, removing Excel, having a more digitalized factory, more real-time data, then that market's going to grow. The people with the knowledge are going to grow, and it will become a lot easier going forward. You kind of build on that momentum. And that's the way I see the market going, and I think that's a very exciting future. And one of the things I've been trying to do on LinkedIn and with my blog, even if it's just doing a tiny little bit of it, I'm trying to expedite that knowledge share so that more people are aware of where this is going and what benefits are possible to realize when you start embarking on these kind of initiatives.
Yeah, a lot of manufacturing sites, you're right, Matt, would have like 90% or plus would have some sort of SCADA platform, something from a digital platform across their facility. They'll have an ERP or something managing their accounting, but that middle layer, like you call it MES, well, we call it as MES. You're right, not many have it. You still all have a portion of it, or they're trying to grow out. So yep. as these customers and MES, because the ERP, we know there's like Infor's in there. Does Infor have ERP in there? So SAP, there's a lot of products out there that you can call by name. Same with SCADA. But MES is that sort of middle ground where there's not a company that does all the MES functionality you need. You typically would maybe buy or look at what is the most important, I suppose, solution I'm looking for in my business. I think you mentioned OEE was one of those first ones. What are the questions or the things that customers should ask themselves when they implementing MES? Is OEE the first one, or is there a what's your experience show you what they do?
But most people that we work with start with production, quality, and inventory. So that's basically production is starting and stopping jobs, recording production counts, recording scrap, recording the time spent in terms of labor, getting an OEE figure, but not just getting an OEE figure, actually getting, we follow a standard called ISO 22400. It's a range of KPIs related to production, and it actually extends beyond production. So that's what we call the production module. Then you've got quality. It's around doing quality checks, taking samples to labs or doing an inline check. Maybe it's a visual check. You draw where the issues are on an image, doing SPC, certificates of analysis, those sort of things. And inventory is just about consuming materials into the process, validating they're the correct materials to consume. You're not consuming something that isn't the next one in FIFO sequence, or where it's expired, or where it's not in a good state. It's been quarantined. And then creating inventory at the end of the process, printing a label on it. Maybe that's a semi-finished good, and it's now going into another process, and you're tracking the traceability tree all the way back from finished goods to raw materials. Most people start with at least those three, because if you think about being in a factory, that's kind of like the core. Then over time, people will layer on things like maintenance, rather than having a separate maintenance management system. Layering it into the M.E.S has a lot of benefits. You could imagine you've got all your assets defined anyway, whether that's tools or gauges or machines, and you can do things like, okay, there's a downtime. It's reason A. Reason A we know is a breakdown, so we automatically trigger it to the maintenance team. I'm an operator. I'm looking at my screen. I can see all the information about the process, and I've realised that there's a wear in this belt. I can look on the system and see that actually this has already been reported by the last shift, so I don't need to raise it again. And actually the maintenance team are going to come and fix it tomorrow. So that the fact that it's all kind of interconnected means you get a lot more context with the information that you have. I think that really is it's a big strength.
Yeah, that intercoupling with all the other systems, whether that be your SCADA layer or your ERP layer, just passing that information between the layers and then adding that layer of context in terms of operational context is really insightful, really. And it's going to improve as those, I guess, extra functions grow as well. So yeah, it's quite interesting to hear that trajectory.
Yeah. And is there an industry you see, Matt, that has more mature MES in it? Because I think about F&B, you mentioned about quality. I remember going to see one customer, and they in the F&B industry, and when they had an audit, it was 2 or 3 days of lots of time going through showing if a particular batch needed a recall, how quickly can it identify where the batch came from, and it was all on paper. And then some of them moved to an MES solution with a track and trace scenario that can quickly, within minutes, bring up a test where the audit loggers just had auditors full time, working in the business to make sure quality was in time. So is there a particular business you see that are implementing it faster than others, or industries?
I wouldn't say I think people implement it for different reasons. So you've just highlighted a really good reason in food and bev. You also get auditing in automotive and other industries as well. People definitely implement it for different reasons, but I wouldn't say that. I think in all industries there are people who are ahead of the curve and people who are still lagging behind. So I probably wouldn't say there was a particular industry that are more advanced than others, and except for maybe pharma. There's obviously a lot stricter rules there around validation and around electronic batch records, and there's more of an incentive, I guess, on their side to have accurately recorded information and data.
So if you can maybe wrap up, I guess, what is your next kind of focus in your own personal journey? I know you're focusing on LinkedIn, you're doing some blog posts, sharing your knowledge on LinkedIn. What's your next learning journey? I guess, what are you focusing on as well?
Yeah, I mean, I am trying to focus on LinkedIn. It's really hard because you guys will know it's trying to fit this sort of thing in as an extracurricular activity around running the M.E.S business at Infor and having 2 kids, which both of those things are quite full time. But I want to do more on LinkedIn. I think it's really, really important to get kind of the word and the knowledge out there in terms of these applications. And there's still a lot of misinformation out there. I've been trying to bolster up my blog There's still more that I want to do on that. I'd like to build some training courses. So yeah, actually recording videos and questionnaires and giving people a certificate at the end of it to say, I've been through this course and I now understand it to this level. I think that's really important that people. I get so many messages on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, can you just tell me where I can do a training course and this, that, and the other?" And I keep thinking, yeah, I mean, I know the answers to those things, or if I don't, I know someone who does, and we could put something together that would really help people. So, yeah, on a personal level, I would like to do more around the education space. On a work level, I think there's a new kind of emerging thing that's been talked about a lot recently called connected worker. Has a lot of overlap with M.E.S. I've been learning a lot about that recently over the last year or so. I think that's a very exciting space. So I'll be keeping an eye on that, as well as all things AI. Everyone loves talking about AI. I love talking about AI. So that's something that really needs a lot of attention going forward.
Awesome. And if you had a message to the audience today around M.E.S or how they can best kind of contact you as well, what's your kind of final thoughts?
Oh yeah, anyone's welcome to contact me. I'm available on LinkedIn as Matt Barber with the looking eyes afterwards. Just try and make it a bit easier for people to spot me. Looks a bit shady, but it's effective. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking to connect with people. I want to talk to people about M.E.S. And I want to connect with people who have questions. So please do reach out. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have. And if you're interested in some of the stuff I post, then give it a like and a share.
Yeah, that's great, Matt. I encourage all our listeners to do the same, to look you up on LinkedIn. I know you have a blog post as well. And yeah, everyone, Matt is a share on LinkedIn. He's just lots of information as he's done today in today's podcast. So Matt, thank you very much for today. Thanks for sharing your journey with us, your knowledge, your information, and helping us break down what M.E.S into something more approachable, I suppose, so that we're not, it's definitely the journey. It's great that you've shared with us on this, and we've learned a lot about this, and there's a lot of actionable insights here today for our listeners. So thank you very much for joining us today.
I think there's really a great opportunity, I think, for us to bring you back on as well and dive maybe a bit deeper into some of those, functional areas of M.E.S that we haven't maybe touched on as well. So yeah, we'll definitely keep in touch and bring you back on.
Yeah, I'll be very happy to do that. Thank you.
And I guess to everyone that's listening today, don't forget to subscribe to an Unplugged and IoT podcast for more, conversations with industry leaders, innovators, educators, and tune in next time for more great insights from the industry.
And to everyone, this episode of Unplugged is made possible by Phoenix, Contact, and the PLCnext Technology.